Hey, 안녕하세요, 여러분. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Reality Project Bay Area chapter and our program entitled Getting to 100% Clean Energy with Professor Mark Jacobson of Stanford University and Noemí Gallardo of the California Energy Commission. We are so excited you chose to spend time with us this evening. 저는 백순기입니다. My name is Alma Sungi Beck. I am the Climate Justice Co-Chair of the Bay Area chapter. Per our usual custom, I will open the program with an acknowledgement of the land and its original peoples. With respect, I acknowledge the Yelamu or Ramaytush, the people whose lands we currently occupy in San Francisco, as well as the original people of the surrounding San Francisco Bay Area, including the Ohlone bands of Chochenyo and Karen, Yokuts, Muwekma, Coastal Miwok, Southern Pomo, Kashaya, Patwin, Mishawala-Wapo, and Bay Miwok. This land acknowledgement helps remind us of the historic and ongoing oppression of Indigenous people and how the taking and occupying of Indigenous lands and the exploitation of Indigenous people is directly connected to the climate crisis, and how building relationships with and following the leadership of Indigenous people here and everywhere is crucial as we seek and build long-term solutions to our global climate crisis. Now on to the Climate Reality Project. The Climate Reality Project is a nonprofit organization founded and chaired by former US Vice President and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Al Gore. Incidentally, the other recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007 was the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the famous UN body that provides the world with objective scientific information relevant to understanding and ending the climate crisis. The Climate Reality Bay Area chapter is one of more than 100 nationwide chapters focused on taking urgent action to address the climate crisis at a local level. We have over 1,000 members across 8 counties in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we welcome you to join us if you are not already a member. Wei-Tai will be sharing a link at some point of our website, but you can also do a simple web search, Climate Reality Project Bay Area chapter, and you will find us. Some key things that we have been working on this year, very apropos to today's presentation: clean energy, clean transportation, clean buildings, just transition. And as a reminder that climate justice and racial justice is infused in every part of the effort to end the global climate crisis, including the fact that the majority of humans in the world are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or people of color, which makes ending the climate crisis a racial and social justice issue on a global level. Finally, we would like to announce a new benefit to being a member of the Climate Reality Project Bay Area chapter. We have recently, just in the last week, finalized a partnership with the Presidio Graduate School, which has a master's program and MBA in sustainability, and which will now be offering certain discounts to Climate Reality Project Bay Area chapter members. To talk for a minute about the new partnership is Amanda Operman, Associate Vice President of Admissions at Presidio Graduate School. Amanda.
Thank you for that introduction, and hello everybody. My name's Amanda and I'm so glad to be here tonight. I'm very interested in this topic too, so I'm excited that I get to attend and hear everything that we're going to learn this evening. Like our host mentioned, Presidio Graduate School and Climate Reality Bay Area recently entered into an exciting agreement, and it's something that we chose to do because we are so mission aligned. A lot of what was just shared about social equity, social justice, and its ties to the climate crisis, that's something that's also central to what we're doing at Presidio Graduate School. Presidio Graduate School, since its very inception, has been centered around 3 very core pillars of sustainability, social justice, and systems thinking. All of our community, including our staff, our faculty, our students, our alumni, we're all sharing this mission to literally change the world. In fact, a few years ago, the New York Times wrote an article where they said Presidio Graduate School is the place to go if you want to change the world. So we have so much alignment in our mission and what we're both trying to do that we entered into a partnership. And for a certain number of the members, those specifically who are in the Climate Reality Leader Program, those folks will be eligible for 10% scholarship for any one of our programs that we've got. We have an MBA in Sustainable Solutions. We also have an online Masters of Public Administration program. And we have a dual degree program, which is the MBA and the MPA combined. We also have a handful of graduate level certificates in sustainability. I'm going to drop a link in the chat for anyone who wants to visit the page and learn a little more about what the benefit is. If you're already a climate reality leader, you would actually be eligible for this right away. And something that's hot off the press, our president here at Presidio, President Liz Ma, she recently approved a Changemaker Fellowship that's specific to our online Masters of Public Administration program. And it's to help support growth and rebounding in this post-COVID economy. Every student who's admitted for the fall will earn a $5,500 Changemaker Fellowship. So when you combine that with the 10% scholarship, it really brings that tuition down just a considerable amount. So if any of you had any interest in public administration or making an impact in the public sector or the social sector, I would really encourage you to, take a look at that webpage, but then also remember, we have a $5,500 fellowship that's specific to the MPA program this fall.
Thank you, Amanda. Is it okay to wrap, or do you have one more, keep going?
I was just going to say, I'm going to leave you with my email address and then I'll pass it back over to our gracious hosts. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. So with no further ado, I am turning the program over to Heate Kwok, co-founder of the Bay Area chapter, who will introduce our program and our speakers.
Great. Thank you, Alma. Thank you, Amanda. And all right, we're ready to jump right in tonight. Our topic is something that we're very passionate about at the Climate Reality Project, 100% commitment to clean energy and doing it in a way that leaves nobody behind, a just transition. We have two fantastic speakers for you tonight, Mark Jacobson and Noemí Gallardo with the CEC. Let me introduce Mark. Let me say that Mark will speak to us for 40 minutes first. We'll then cut over to Noemí for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll have question and answers at the end after both speakers have presented, okay? You're free to type your questions in the chat, but we'll generally be calling on you during the Q&A. So with that, let me introduce Professor Jacobson, who is with Stanford University's Atmosphere and Energy program, and he's a professor of civil and environmental engineering. We had the privilege of hearing him speak to us in February of 2018 at a time when he was one of the lone voices out there saying that we can achieve 100% clean energy with technologies available today. And he had put his team together to put roadmaps for all 50 states and 130 countries, maybe he's up to 150 countries by now. And as a part of that day, a couple years ago, we all sat down and wrote letters to the Governor, Jerry Brown, to support SB 100, which was passed later in that year as part of a wonderful effort back then. So we're going to hear about an update on SB 100 today as well. But one of the things that Professor Jacobson's been doing since he last saw us is he wrote a book called 100% Clean Renewable Energy and Storage for Everything by Cambridge University Press. Congratulations on that book. And his work is actually also the scientific basis of the energy portion of the US Green New Deal. So let me turn it over to Mark. Go ahead, Mark. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Wait, let me just share my screen here. Thanks, Heate. I'm going to talk about transitioning California and the US, and in fact the world, to 100% clean renewable energy and storage. And I'm going to present some new results for California, for the US, and actually for the world. But things haven't changed a whole lot, although there has been some improvement over the last few years. So these are the three problems that we're trying to solve together, it's not just global warming. Global warming will cost about $25 to $30 trillion per year by 2050. But right now, there are 7 million people worldwide who die from air pollution prematurely, and hundreds of millions more who are ill, and 10,000 die in California every year. And this costs the world already $30 trillion per year. So these are both huge problems, but fossil fuels are also limited resources. And as they disappear, prices of energy will rise and we'll get economic, social, and political instability. And these are all problems that require drastic and immediate solutions. So the idea here is to electrify all energy. So we're trying to, well, first of all, energy accounts for about 75 to 80% of all greenhouse gas and dark particle emissions that affect global warming, and about 90 to 95% of air pollutants. So we want to address not only energy, but also non-energy sources. Those non-energy sources are biomass burning, nitrous oxide for fertilizers, methane from landfills, and agriculture, other types of agriculture like cattle and sheep and manure, and also from landfills, and also halogens, leftovers for like CFCs, but also their substitutes, and a few others. So we want to address those as well. I'm going to focus here on the energy portion. And so there are four major sectors of energy. There's electricity, transportation, buildings, and industry. And so for transportation, the idea here is to electrify all energy sectors or provide some direct heat, and provide the electricity and direct heat with just wind and water and solar. So our plans do not include any type of fossil fuel with carbon capture. We do not include direct air capture. We do not include bioenergy, biomass, biofuels. We do not include nuclear power. We do not include solar radiation management or any other type of geoengineering. Entirely clean renewable energy, because we want to solve air pollution problems simultaneously. So carbon capture increases air pollution, increases mining, hardly reduces CO2. Biofuels increase air pollution and have land use constraints, land use problems. And nuclear power, of course, has energy security problems, as well as it also has CO2 associated with it. It's much better, of course, than fossil fuels, but it's still 9 to 37 times the CO2 per kilowatt hour as wind. A lot of it's due to the fact that it takes 15 years between planning and operation of a nuclear plant versus 2 to 3 years at most now for wind or solar. So that difference in time alone results in huge emission differences. And in addition to the direct emissions from heat and water vapor that nuclear causes, as well as the emissions resulting from refining uranium, which is very energy intensive. Anyway, we're looking at wind, water, and solar. So for transportation, we're going to go to battery electric vehicles for most everything, except for long distance heavy transport, where we use some hydrogen that's produced from clean renewable electricity. So long distance ships and planes, mostly, some long distance trains and trucks, but everything else be battery electric. Buildings, we go to electric heat pumps for individual buildings. And then there'll be some for dense urban areas. We can use district heating. I mean, 7% of the US is already under district heating, where you have centralized heating and cooling. And that centralized heating could be either from using heat pumps running on wind, water, solar, electricity, or some direct geothermal heat or direct solar heat. For industry, high temperature processes, we get rid of oil, gas, and coal burning for high temperatures and move to electric arc furnaces, induction furnaces, resistance furnaces, dielectric heaters, electron beam heaters. These are all existing technologies. And the electricity for all these sectors, we'd provide just with onshore and offshore wind, solar photovoltaics on rooftops and power plants, concentrated solar, geothermal, hydro, and tiny amounts of tidal wave. And so this is entirely clean renewable energy. Now we need some storage. Whoops, skip this slide. Oh, sorry, this is just, I was going to show you okay, so electric for airplanes will have, for long distance heavy aircraft, we'd use hydrogen fuel cells, but right now we have 95% of all the technologies we need, but 5% that we don't have right now are long distance heavy aircraft and ships, We know how to do it, but we just haven't put our minds to it yet. But we do have short distance aircraft. So here are a couple examples. Here's a 9-seat battery electric aircraft on the left and a 4-seat hydrogen fuel cell aircraft on the right. So short distance air travel is already starting to be electrified. So for storage, we need electricity storage, heat storage, cold storage, and hydrogen storage. So electricity, there's concentrated solar power with storage, pumped hydroelectric, existing hydroelectric dams are basically big batteries, batteries themselves, flywheels, compressed air storage, and gravitational storage. And I'll show examples of a couple of these in a sec. For heating and cooling, these are all existing technologies: water tank, storage for hot and cold water, ice for cold, underground borehole and water pit storage for heat, and aquifers for both heat and cold. And then building materials, you can store heat in there. So these are low cost existing heating and cooling storage technologies. Hydrogen storage, of course, is basically a tank. So that also exists. So as I mentioned, we have about 95% of the technologies we need to solve the problem moving forward today. Now, here's some examples of some emerging storage technologies: gravitational storage with solid masses. The idea here is when you have extra wind or solar, you'd use it to run a motor to lift a concrete block, for example, on the left, or to push a train up a hill, like on the right, where the train is filled with rocks or concrete. And then when you need electricity, you lower the concrete or you let the train roll down the hill, and then the motor turns into a generator when it's run in reverse to generate electricity. And this is very similar to pumped hydroelectric power, except it's not with water. But it's similar efficiency though. District heating, well, so water tank storage is very common. This is Stanford has converted, well, in 2016, it converted its natural gas cogeneration plant. It tore it down, destroyed it, replaced it with these 2 chillers and a boiler, and about 40 miles worth of hot water pipes and 40 miles of cold water pipes around the university. And then to provide the hot and cold, it uses mostly heat pumps. And the electricity for the heat pumps comes from solar farms. Well, it's about 150 megawatts of solar, including 10 megawatts on rooftops and 140 megawatts in solar farms. And so the university now is actually virtually 100%, if not already 100% renewable, not only for electricity, but also heating and cooling. First university in the world to do that. And this is a 4th generation district heating system, which involves both heating and cooling loops. And there's actually, I think, the first 4th generation district heating system in the world as well. Now, another type of district heating is underground borehole storage, which you can see on the right. So you can't see it actually because it's underground, but it's underneath this grass. It's a grassy field. This is in Okotoks, Canada. It's 1 hour south of Calgary. Today being the longest day of the year, well, it's even longer in Calgary and Okotoks because it's closer to the North Pole, which on the longest day of the year has 24 hours of sunlight. So in the summer, Canada collects a lot of sunlight. And so there are 52 homes built in 2004 and 5 on the top left. They have solar collectors on the roofs. And there's a glycol solution that gets heated up by direct sunlight. That hot solution gets sent to this building on the right, where the heat is transferred to water. The water is then piped underground in U-shaped pipes. And the heat in the water gets transferred to the soil. The soil heats up to around 80 degrees Celsius below the ground, and the pipes go down to around 30 meters. And that heat is stored for up to 6 months. And it provides, then in the winter, like when the snow is on the ground, like on the left, everything is run in reverse. The heat is transferred back to the buildings, and it provides 100% of the wintertime heating for these homes. So that's borehole storage. And that costs less than $1 a kilowatt hour of thermal storage. For comparison, batteries are somewhere around $100 to $200 a kilowatt hour for electric storage. So it's really inexpensive storage, but there hasn't been an incentive to do that until recently. This is similar. It's called water pit storage, and there are several of these in Scandinavian countries, like in Denmark. You have a swimming pool basically that's partly underground. You fill it with water, cover it with insulation. You have these solar collectors that collect heat, they get transferred to the water heats up to about 80 degrees Celsius and is stored till winter time, and then the system then heats this village of Vogens, which is around 2,500 households during winter time. So this is again a district heating thermal energy storage system. Another type of storage system is ice storage. So very few people know that Stanford University actually had a big ice cube under a building since 1998. Actually, I think it shut down a couple of years ago when the district heating system came around. But what happens here is when at night, when electricity price is low, ice is formed. And then during the day, instead of using air conditioning, water is run through coils in the ice and then piped to buildings to cool the building. So this is a form of battery storage because it displaces electricity use in the afternoon. But this costs about 1/10 the cost per kilowatt hour than compared with a battery. So it's actually a very inexpensive form of storage, and many stadiums and hospitals use ice storage as well. Now, I want to talk next about transitioning an individual building to entirely clean renewable energy. So I'll focus on my own home since I have a lot of experience with that. So I built this home finishing in 2017, so it's been over 4 years now. It has 13.7 kilowatts of solar photovoltaics on the roof. And it has 4 generation 1 Tesla wall mount batteries. Each one is 3.3 kilowatts and 6.4 kilowatt hours of storage. But PG&E, in its wisdom, allowed me only to turn on 2 batteries. So all the results I have are based on 2 batteries rather than 4, which turned out to be fine because, first of all, when the first 2 batteries, when they eventually drain, which they're not even close to doing that yet, but when they do, I'll basically have 2 fresh batteries that can be used for another 10, 15 years after that. So there's basically 30 years of batteries here, at least. And the other thing is, it turns out, just because for time of use reasons, it's actually 2 batteries was sufficient. And it might have even been more expensive to turn on 4 batteries based on the fact that there's net metering, or there's time of use net metering, which they have 3 different rates. And there's the most expensive rate is in the afternoon, the cheapest rate is late at night, and then there's an in-between rate. And if you're charging the batteries at the medium rate, but you're using the batteries at the low rate at night, then you're actually losing money. So there's an optimal amount. It turned out to be 2. But anyway, so everything is electric. There's no gas in this home. The home itself is made of prefabricated. The structure is steel structure with 80% recycled steel. The company was Bone Structure who put it together. They assembled the structure in a week, but then the house took a year to finish. But it has heat pumps. And so these are called Ductless mini split electric heat pump air heaters and air conditioners. So there are 2 outside units like on the right, and then each room has an inside unit on the left, which just basically, so heat pumps, they just move heat around. They don't create heat or destroy it. So when you need heat, when it's cold, let's say inside, and you want heat, you extract it out of the air from the outside and move it inside. And when you need cold, you extract it from the air from the outside, and move it inside. So because it just moves energy rather than creates energy or destroys it, it only uses 1/4 the energy as a natural gas heater or even an electric resistance heater. So it's very efficient. And in very extreme climates, like on the East Coast, where you have very cold winters, you would use a ground source heat pump. And now there are ground source heat pump companies that they just drill vertically, and it's very inexpensive as well. It used to be much more expensive for ground source heat pumps, but now it's much closer to air source heat pumps. So there's a heating solution for everything now with heat pumps, and it uses very little energy. And even water can be heated with an electric heat pump. So this is just like a normal heat pump, except normal water heater, except it's electric, and it has a heat pump instead of electric resistance. It uses 1/4 the energy as a gas heater, and it heats perfectly fine. For a stove, instead of a gas stove or electric resistance, I use electric induction cooktop, which boils water in half the time as gas. It cooks evenly. Because you heat the pot and not the stove, when you touch the stove, even when you're boiling water, the stove is just warm, and so you don't burn your hand. So that's very nice. I show this individual cooker on the left. And that individual cooker costs about anywhere from $45 to $100. Now, I mentioned 7 million people die worldwide from air pollution. A little over 3 million are from indoor burning of biomass and coal and dung in developing countries and for home heating and cooking. So a lot of that's from cooking. And you can imagine replacing the burning stuff in your home with an induction cooktop, like on the left, even a single burner. And if you just have an electric source, like a few solar panels on the roof and maybe one battery or a community battery and community solar, then you can reduce air pollution death and morbidity significantly, especially since 20% of those deaths are children under the age of 5 years old. So this is a real solution to eliminating health problems associated with burning fuels. Now, over 4 years of energy use, I generated 120% of all my home and vehicle energy use. So I have 2 electric vehicles there. And I paid no electric bill, no natural gas bill or gasoline bill in 4 years. In fact, the extra 20% I sent back to my community choice aggregation utility, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and I've received an average of $800 per year from them. And this year, in fact, it was $1,000, maybe because I wasn't driving as much or something. And also there seems to be more, I noticed there's more solar radiation this year. And that's why we have a drought, because there's fewer clouds and rain. But avoided also, I did not have to pay a gas hookup fee. That saved about $6,000. Here I'm showing a range that typical homeowners would save. I did not have to pay for pipes, about $10,000, and then I didn't have to pay the bills. So a total of $5,000 to $23,000 up front is the range of savings, plus $3,000 to $10,000 per year. In addition, you don't need like a carbon monoxide monitor. You don't need ditching for your gas pipes. Such that there's a lot of benefits. There's no reason you need 2 sources of energy in your home. It's just an extra cost and a burden and pollution that you don't need. So with subsidies, it's about a 5-year payback time. Without subsidies, it's about 10 years, but the panels are warranted for 25 years, so it's a no-brainer. Now, I just want to show this example. This was the hottest day of the year last year, September 6th. And the outside temperature was 106 degrees Fahrenheit, inside temperature 77. And this shows on the right, the solar production in the green during the day. The blue during the day is solar being used for for cooling, for the air conditioning. I maintain the temperature so it wouldn't go above 77. So the heat pump is running, is extracting cold out of 106 degree Fahrenheit air outside. So you might think that's extremely inefficient. Well, it's less inefficient certainly than if the temperature outside was 77 degrees for sure. But you can see it still works. I mean, it still works and it's not using a lot of energy. So the blue during the day is from solar. The blue at night is from the batteries. The red is I needed some grid electricity because I'm only storing energy in 2 batteries. If I had all 4 on, then I wouldn't see any red. But I still produced 15 kilowatt hours more than I consumed during that day. So you can imagine if all homes and apartments and buildings in California and elsewhere just had heat pumps and solar, there would be no blackouts. In fact, we wouldn't have anything close to a blackout. It's due to the inefficiency of the current energy system that we have these blackouts, and also homes can be insulated better as well. Now, you might ask, well, what about at night? Because if we transition California to 100% renewables right now, during the day in California on the weekends, we're all actually often getting, for either a few minutes, we're getting up to 85 to 90% wind, water, solar electricity production in California. For 5-hour periods during some weekends, we're getting over 80% wind, water, solar providing electricity. But we want it not only during the day and on weekends, but we want it at night and also the whole year. So one way is to grow offshore wind. And because while solar, of course, peaks during the day, when you go to night, we're suddenly using more gas at night, more imports at night. So how do you get rid of that? You go to offshore wind. So this shows, especially in the summer, because the summertime electricity use in California is like 50 to 100% higher than other seasons. But coincidentally, you can see from this graph, this is wind data for offshore Cape Mendocino, Northern California. The July wind power output is so much higher than all the other seasons as well. So it's actually a nice coincidence that you get your most offshore wind power in the same season as you have the highest electricity demand in California. Not only that, you can see that in the evening, you have a peak of wind power output in July. So there you can see why we want to grow a lot of wind power offshore California to take over when solar goes down at night and provide a huge amount of electricity. Now, fortunately, the federal government has just opened up 2 areas of California, one near Cape Mendocino, Northern California, the other near where Diablo Canyon nuclear plant is, since it's going to be shut down and you have this big transmission corridor right to the coast there. So we will be growing offshore wind in California, but we need to do it really fast and quite a lot of it. One more thing that I found that was interesting from a recent study was the relationship between wind power output and building heat demand in cold regions. So this is not so applicable to California, but it is applicable to Texas, but in a lot of places in the US and northern latitudes. So it turns out that when you have a high demand for heat, so in other words, when it's cold outside, you also have a lot of wind available. In fact, this shows this strong linear correlation between building heat load or demand for heating and wind power output in over large regions, in mostly in high latitude places like Canada, Europe, Russia, but even in Texas, there's a correlation. So you can imagine, and so if we want to heat with heat pumps, electric heat pumps, this is the way to do it, is to grow wind in northern latitudes, to grow wind farms and use that electricity for heat pumps for wintertime heating. So that'll be a very good use of wind energy. Okay, so now the next question is, can the world transition to 100% clean renewable energy for all purposes? So actually, I forgot to update this slide. It's really, we have now data for 145 countries, actually, although I'll show the data for 143 countries. I'll also show results for California and the United States. So this is for worldwide. In 2016, the end-use demand for all power was about 12.6 trillion watts. That's expected to go up to 20.3 trillion watts in 2050. But if we electrify all energy, we go down 57% to 8.7 trillion watts or terawatts. And that's because battery electric vehicles replacing internal combustion engine vehicles eliminate a huge amount of energy requirements. So average overall energy sectors, there's a 22% reduction of power demand due just to transitioning to electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell. There's a 3.4% reduction of energy going to electrified industry, 13% going to heat pumps for heating and cooling. And then 12% is due to eliminating energy in the mining, transporting, and refining of fossil fuels and uranium, since that's how much energy, 12% of all our energy worldwide is used for that purpose, and we won't need that anymore. And then a 6.6% is energy efficiency improvements beyond business as usual. So a total of 57% reduction of power demand by going to electricity for all purposes and clean renewable energy. Now, that means if we have less energy, even if the cost per unit energy were the same, we're using 57% less energy, so that we actually pay annually 57% lower costs. Now, in the US, these are numbers for the US, starting with 2018 end-use demand, 2.4 trillion watts. It goes up to 2.7 trillion watts in 2050 for all purposes. But going to wind, water, solar, you go down 57% for the same reasons. If we go to California, these are in gigawatts, 202 gigawatts in 2018, 2050, go to 2019 gigawatts, go down 60% in California. And that's because a lot of California's energy is transportation, and electrifying transportation, you get a big benefit. So in all cases, you're just reducing power demand significantly. So we came up with, for every country and every state in the US, we came up with a distribution of renewables, of wind, water, solar renewables to power each country and state. And so onshore wind, I'll look at California in the last column here, it's about 15% onshore wind, 18% offshore wind, 22% rooftop PV, 34% utility PV, 35%, 2% CSP, concentrated solar, 3% geothermal, 5% hydro, and that's all existing, so no new hydro there. And then tiny amount of tidal and wave power. So that's 100% of all energy in California for all purposes, just with wind, water, and solar. You might ask, well, how much land does this take up? Well, we don't need any new land for tidal and wave power, for offshore wind. We are not adding any new hydro plants. We're just using existing hydro. Rooftop solar doesn't take up any new land. So the only new land, and geothermal small, the only new land is PV plus CSP for on the utility scale and onshore wind. And for onshore wind, that's just space between wind turbines that you can use for multiple purposes, including putting solar PV on it. So I'll go down to California. You can see it's about 1% of California's land, about 2/3 for onshore wind and 1/3 for offshore wind. Now, just for comparison, the fossil fuel industry uses 1.3% of all California and US land. So we're actually, by going to wind, water, solar, we're actually reducing land use, not only in California, but in the US as a whole. You can see use 1.1% of US land if we transition. So we're reducing land requirements and not increasing it. And that's, much to the chagrin of the fossil fuel industry, who like to always say that wind and solar take up huge amounts of land. Now, can we keep the grid stable? Well, we've done simulations looking at grid stability in all 50 states and all these 143 countries. And we found, yes, we can keep the grid stable everywhere with just wind, water, solar, and storage and demand response. So here, for example, is California meeting demand every 30 seconds for 2 years with just wind, water, solar. The red is the total wind, water, solar electricity plus heat generation before losses. And the blue is the electricity demand plus changes in storage plus losses due to storage, transmission, distribution, and shedding of energy. Anyway, the point is we can match demand with supply continuously. You want to know, well, what's the cost of energy to match demand with supply? Well, worldwide, the capital cost is about $73 trillion to transition everything. That's the worldwide Green New Deal cost of energy. In the US, the Green New Deal is about $9 trillion to transition all energy for all purposes, to eliminate air pollution, to eliminate, and that's the US eliminating air pollution means about 78,000 deaths per year in the US and hundreds of thousands or millions of illnesses. California, it's about $500 billion to $500 billion. Now, keep in mind that will all pay for itself over time through electricity sales. So it's not like the government has to put out that money, but you do need to spur the investment fast because we need to transition as rapidly as possible. But what's more relevant than the upfront capital cost is what's the annual cost, because people in businesses get loans usually to pay off the capital cost. So you want to compare the annual cost of energy with business as usual to that with wind, water, solar. So worldwide, the annual cost of transitioning is about $18 trillion per year in energy, 30 trillion for health, 28 trillion for climate. A total of $76 trillion per year is the social cost of energy. But we eliminate health and climate costs with wind, water, solar, and we use 57% less energy, plus the cost per unit energy is another 10% lower. So we reduce energy costs 61% down to 6.8 trillion a year, and social costs by 91%. This is the stark benefit of transitioning to wind, water, solar. It's this huge cost reduction due to the fact that we use so much less energy and the cost per unit energy is lower, and we eliminate health and climate costs. We reduce, on the order of $68 trillion per year of health plus climate plus energy costs. In the US, similarly, we get similar percent reduction, 63% energy cost reduction, 86% social cost reduction. We've spent basically $930 billion per year. That's just a little bit more than the military budget per year to transition entirely to clean, renewable energy for everything. For California, again, we get 68% reduction of energy costs, 90% reduction of social costs, going from $190 billion a year in energy costs in 2050 to $61 billion a year. And then the social costs go down from 574 to 61 billion per year. So the last part of this is the policies. where are we and how did we get here? Well, the first study that we looked at, where we looked at going to 100% renewable energy for all purposes, was in 2009, which was a worldwide study that Mark DeLuca and I did, that looked at, was it possible to transition worldwide all energy to just wind, water, solar by 2030? And we found, well, yes, it's technically and economically possible, but for social and political reasons, maybe more likely that a complete transition could occur by 2050, with at least 80% by 2030. Little did we realize that this was the scientific basis for the Green New Deal, which was to go to 100% renewables by 2030. So we still think it's technically possible to go there by 2030, but again, it's really a social and political obstacle to get there. So that's what we have to overcome. But since then, 61 countries have now committed to 100% renewable electricity. Keep in mind, electricity is only 20% of all end-use energy, and the other sectors are the rest. But still, that's a good stop. Only one of these countries, Denmark, has committed to 100% all energy being from renewables. There are actually now 13 countries near or above 100% renewable electricity. When I say near, it's like 98, 99%, or above, up to 300% of all their electricity is from renewables. And actually, these are wind, water, solar renewables. So most of these are countries that have hydro as their main source. So Iceland, Norway, Costa Rica, Paraguay, Uruguay, Tajikistan, Albania, Scotland, Kenya, Bhutan, Nepal, Ethiopia, and the DR Congo. They all, except for Kenya and Scotland, Kenya is mostly geothermal and Scotland is mostly wind. They're all 100% renewables, mostly with hydro. In the US, there have been 8 proposed laws and resolutions for the US to go to 100% renewables. Not one has been voted on. The last 2 were the Green New Deal. But there are now 15 states and territories that have laws or executive orders. So of those, Rhode Island has the most aggressive, to go to 100% renewable electricity by 2030, Washington, D.C. by 2032, Connecticut and Oregon by 2040. I should mention that the Oregon one is just pending. It still hasn't been put on there, even though it's been passed through the House, and I think it will be signed because there's not much opposition, but it hasn't actually officially been signed. 2045, you can see all these states, and then 2050, a bunch more. So that's really good news. So at the state level, a lot is happening. There are also 176 US cities and counties committed to 100% renewables in the US, including major cities like San Francisco, among others, but also small towns and cities. And there are over 300 international companies committed, including 8 of the 10 biggest companies in the world. And so these companies are really driving a lot of change. They're actually building wind farms and solar farms and storage in a lot of different places. And of course, a lot of nonprofits, including Climate Reality, are committed to 100% renewable. So it's really been a combination of working with scientists, business people, communities, nonprofits, cultural leaders, all working together towards this goal. And this is really why we have made a lot of progress, although there's a huge amount that needs to be done. I should say, when I say progress, like this year, in the first 4 months, 94% of all the new electric power nameplate capacity in the US was wind, water, or solar. And we can see that renewables are growing worldwide in a lot of places and pretty quickly, and so is storage and electric vehicles. So just to summarize, this is California. If we transition California to 100% renewables, we create 300,000 more jobs that are lost. It would require a total of about 1% of the state's land, but 2/3 of that can be used for multiple purposes, like farmland, ranching land, and rangeland, and putting solar on it as well. We'd avoid over 10,000 air pollution deaths per year, slow then reverse global warming. We can keep the grid stable with 100%. And absolute energy costs are 68% lower in California, and social costs are 90% lower. So finally, here's some links in case they're of interest. And I'm happy to answer questions later, but I'll stop there since I'm sure I'm over time now.
You're
So,
doing great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. And the only thing about having this virtual thing is you can't hear everybody applauding, but I'd like to ask everybody to do their virtual snaps or whatever to thank Mark for a wonderful and inspiring presentation. You jammed a lot in there. So thank you.
yeah, thanks. Well, I'll put all these links in the chat.
In the
case
chat.
anyone wants them.
And
But otherwise, yeah, I'll stop
question for
there.
you, is this presentation something that you'll be able to share with me afterwards to share with the group?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can
Okay.
send it to you and you're welcome to distribute it.
So just so everybody knows, today's presentation is being recorded. We post many of our recordings on our website, climaterealitybayarea.org/events under the June 21st date. And so that's where you'll find the video of this event plus any PowerPoints that the speakers share with us. All right, so super. We're gonna please hold your questions because we'd like to move on to our next presenter, Noemí Gallardo. And I'd like to just introduce her from, she was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom to the California Energy Commission, the CEC, as the public advisor back in September 2019. She oversees the Public Advisor's Office, which advises the public and the CEC to ensure the full and effective participation by all interest groups and the public at large in the CEC's planning, procedures, business meetings, workshops, and others. So it's really about inclusiveness. And previous to the CEC, she was a senior manager of public policy at Sunrun, the solar company. She's the proud daughter of Mexican immigrants. And we're really delighted to have you here today to follow up on the vision and the excitement that we heard about how technically it's possible to achieve 100% commitment to renewable energy and not just the grid, but everything else. So let's look at California's policy in SB 100. How are we on our roadmap to that 2045? How are we going to bring along all communities? It's a tough question, but you're the one to help us answer it, or at least get us discussing it. So take it away, Noemí. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. I'm honored to be here with you, and Dr. Jacobson is a very hard act to follow, so I'll do my best to complement what he taught us today. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around the energy storage with the boreholes and the ice. I think that's like just so cool. And then Dr. Jacobson, I also have to give you kudos for that check from Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Love that. So thank you for your personal contributions to getting us to 100% clean energy. So much appreciate, as I said, being here, and wanted to clarify, I have been advising the Commission's internal team who's been working on the 100% clean energy efforts on their equity and engagement aspects for this effort. And today I'm going to discuss some of the context, scope, and some of the key findings of our first SB 100 joint agency report, along with the equity implications and potential impacts. And I do want to acknowledge that there were many contributors, for this report. It was a joint agency effort, so requiring collaboration between the Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and the Air Resources Board. But the Energy Commission was the lead agency. And like you all, we are committed, 100% committed to 100% clean energy. And that is our slogan, is leading the state to 100% clean energy future. So with that, let's go into the report. So SB 100 does three primary things. It establishes the policy that eligible, renewable, and zero carbon resources will supply 100% of all retail sales and electricity procured to serve state loads by 2045, as was mentioned earlier. It expands the RPS from 50% to 60% by 2030. And finally, it requires the Energy Commission and the Public Utilities Commission and the Air Resources Board to use existing programs to achieve that 2045 policy, and also to issue a joint agency report every 4 years. So we've issued one, and you'll see several more from us. I also want to point out that SB 100 didn't really have an equity focus in its design, and it doesn't speak to equity in a way that requires specific action for these purposes. For example, the the one mention of communities in the text of SB 100, it is just this statement that says, when supplying electricity generated by renewable energy resources, it is necessary to improve California's air quality and public health, particularly in disadvantaged communities, as identified by the Cal Enviro screen. And then it also mentions that the commission shall ensure rates are just and reasonable and not significantly affected by the procurement requirements. So this is helpful that it was in there, but it's a bit wishy-washy, right? So the good thing is that the Energy Commission and our state agency partners have committed to advancing equity and environmental social justice and wanted to prioritize equity in our processes. So we kind of, took that upon ourselves. And the Energy Commission in particular does view getting to 100% as meaning 100% for all Californians. So 100% of Californians should be benefiting so that no one is left out, no one left behind. And then speaking of clean air and its benefits, SB 100 is central to achieving the state's goal of economy-wide carbon neutrality by 2045, as electrification has become a central strategy to making economy-wide greenhouse gas reductions. And increasingly, clean electricity will be needed to power transportation, buildings, and industrial operations in order to decarbonize these sectors. And the chart on the screen here shows the makeup of California's 2018 greenhouse gas emissions. And we see that along with electricity generation, these sectors account for 92% of the state's total carbon emissions. So electrification and clean electricity have the potential to make these economy-wide reductions. And in terms of benefits, so in addition to serving as a key pillar in the state's efforts to mitigate climate change, SB 100 is expected to provide 3 specific benefits as we see it. First, improving public health. So primarily through the reduction over time in the criteria air pollution as clean resources replace fossil fuel in generating electricity. Second, advancing energy equity. So by moving toward the 100% target in ways that help ensure equitable outcomes, such as alleviating the public health burden in disadvantaged communities in particular, where a disproportionate number of the state's fossil gas power plants are located. And I'll add this, the commission recently approved some grants to advance research to help us learn more about how to decommission power plants faster and hopefully in frontline communities who are disproportionately affected by climate change, health vulnerabilities, and economic disparities. And third, it can support a clean energy economy. So by helping to restore thousands of clean energy jobs lost during the pandemic, for example, which has been affecting a lot of people, and creating many more high quality jobs and career pathways. And as we get into the results, I'll talk about the magnitude of resources we're projecting that we'll need to achieve SB 100 while electrifying large portions of the economy. And so while it won't be easy to meet that goal, I agree with Dr. Jacobson, it is possible. And it does present a major economic development and workforce opportunity, especially for a just transition for these equity and frontline communities. So throughout the report process, stakeholder input was essential and still is essential in developing all that we're doing. And we plan to continue having robust engagement and hopefully in-person engagement as we're integrating back into society. The report was informed by a diverse array of interests. For about a year and a half, we did public workshops, including a series of scoping workshops that were held in different regions across the state. We heard from tribes, community leaders, academics, local government entities, trade associations, environmental and social justice advocates, among others. And the joint agencies also consulted with the California balancing authorities, as was required by the statute, and our Disadvantaged Communities Advisory Group, also known as DACAG. That's a group that advises both the Energy Commission and the Public Utilities Commission on clean energy, equity, and environmental social justice issues. And I want to acknowledge that the feedback from equity and environmental social justice advocates was extremely valuable. They pushed us, for example, to have a no combustion scenario, which we may not have otherwise, Due to the feedback we got from them, we also made another change, which was to commit to incorporating non-energy benefits and social costs into our analyses for the implementation. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have taken it seriously and probably wouldn't have even thought about it. And then other feedback we heard from them was that SB 100 provided a forum to speak to several agencies at once instead of in silos. So we're hoping to continue doing that to ensure our various agency efforts build on each other and advance together instead of separately. That's a big thing for our agencies and hard to do. And then moving on to the report itself, this was a first step to evaluate the challenges and opportunities in achieving 100% clean electricity by 2045. And the report does include an initial assessment of the additional energy resources and the resource build rates needed to achieve the goal, along with an initial assessment of associated costs with various pathways. And I will say that the modeling that we used did focus on costs. The estimates in this report are intended to serve as a foundation for future work, and they may change over time as additional factors come into play, such as system reliability, land use, and energy equity, which will be more closely examined. And also as technology maturity and cost projections evolve over time. So we definitely do not view this report as a crystal ball forecasting what the power sector will look like in 20 to 25 years. Instead, it really is an initial assessment to guide us in where we need to focus our planning and our analytical efforts and what the potential hurdles and opportunities may be along the way. And then getting into the technical work, I thought this would be of interest to you folks. I know you are quite savvy here. So we hired Energy and Environmental Economics, also known as E3, to conduct the modeling and to execute the joint agency scenarios framework. E3 used a capacity expansion model called Resolve to model the resource investments needed over time to meet our target. And this specific version of the model was adapted from the CPUC's integrated resource planning process. So we thought that that would be more efficient to use a model that already existed. And it is a simplified representation of the California grid and optimizes selection of new renewable gas or integration resources in order to meet future demand and policy goals. So a full scope for a resource planning exercise could include more detailed reliability analysis or quantifying portfolio impacts. This was not included in our original exercise, but it's something that we will and can consider for future. And so just to emphasize here that the SB 100 results are directional. And then in order for resources to qualify as a zero carbon resource in the model, the resource must either be RPS eligible or have zero on-site greenhouse gas emissions. So specifically the renewable and zero carbon resources included in the modeling were new and existing solar photovoltaic, the PV, existing solar thermal, new and existing onshore wind, and new offshore wind, new and existing geothermal, new and existing bioenergy, new green hydrogen fuel cells, existing small and large hydro facilities, and existing nuclear power plants. So a lot of the things that Dr. Jacobson was talking to us about earlier. And this list will continue to be updated in the future as emerging technologies mature and come to market. So again, this is just an initial assessment, and we do expect the picture will evolve as we move forward. Now I'm going to review some of our scenario results at a very high level. Overall, the modeling results indicated that to meet our SB 100 goals while electrifying large portions of the rest of the economy, we will need to roughly triple our current electric grid capacity. And on this slide, we see the projected new clean energy resources in comparison to the clean energy resources already on the California grid today. In the 2030 and 2045 column, those numbers are cumulative new selection for that year. And looking at 2045, the SB 100 modeling projected that we'll need nearly 70 gigawatts of new utility scale solar, nearly 30 gigawatts of new customer solar, nearly 50 gigawatts of battery storage, 4 gigawatts of long duration storage, 12.6 gigawatts of onshore wind, 10 gigawatts of offshore wind, and 100 megawatts of geothermal. All of this in order to meet our 100% renewable and zero carbon electricity target in 2045 in a high electrification future. And these resources are projected to increase annual cost by 6% above the 60% RPS baseline in 2045. So I don't know if all of this aligns with Dr. Jacobson's calculations there, but I thought it was important to include what our team has found. And then to achieve the massive build out of renewable energy and storage resources, I thought it was also important to point out to you that it's going to require a sustained record-setting building through 2045. So a tripling of our solar and wind build rates from our 10-year historic average, and an 8-fold increase in battery build rates from 2020. So that presents a potential challenge when we think about land use planning, right? And also land use impacts, but also an incredible opportunity in terms of workforce opportunities. So needless to say, with all policy, there are trade-offs, and it requires, making the most informed decisions possible and gathering community input to figure out, what decisions to make. But I thought it was important to point out to you these things. And then the joint agencies also explored sensitivities and several scenarios outside the core scope of SB 100. So the sensitivities were largely around future electric demand and resource availability. So highlighting just one of these sensitivities was a high demand flexibility scenario that included 6 gigawatts of load flexibility. So this additional flexibility resulted in less new batteries, increased gas plant retirements, and lower overall costs. So this is something we think is important moving forward. And the joint agencies also modeled several study scenarios that are intended to inform broader state planning efforts on energy, climate, and public health. So a couple of examples of the study scenarios are a no combustion scenario where all combustion resources, including gas-fired power plants, were retired by 2045. And the initial results indicated this scenario would increase annual cost by 12% in 2045. So we do see this scenario as an important benchmark and a starting place for conversations about what it would take to retire the gas fleet, which is something we're excited about, but of course, a challenge. And then the joint agencies also modeled several scenarios that accelerated the SB 100 target to 2040, 2035, and 2030. And so these results are indicated that the targets may be achievable, but may also increase overall costs. So again, findings are preliminary and require further analysis. And then here are the key takeaways that we got from the SB 100 modeling. So first, this initial analysis, like Dr. Jacobson said, is yes, SB 100 is technically achievable through multiple pathways. Second, achieving SB 100 requires record-setting rates of construction of clean electricity generation and storage facilities. Third, the modeling showed that diversity in energy resources and technologies lowers overall costs. It also showed that retaining some natural gas power capacity may minimize costs while ensuring uninterrupted power supply during the transition to 100% clean energy. However, increased energy storage and advancements in zero carbon technologies may reduce those natural gas capacity needs. And finally, further analysis is needed, and this is, again, the initial assessment of that. And then in terms of recommendations that we have for further analysis, this includes verifying that scenario results satisfy the state's grid reliability requirements across a range of conditions. So grid reliability right now is one of the most important things, especially as we're in this, starting out this hot summer, because it becomes more and more important for us to have a grid that is reliable so that folks aren't not just, in some type of discomfort, but aren't impacted, right, in their daily lives or, affecting the health of their children and whatnot. So that's really important to us. And, as we mentioned, the model that we used is a simplified representation of the California grid. So we're hoping to do more with that. And then second, we need to continue evaluating the potential effects of cost saving, emerging resources such as offshore wind, long duration storage, green hydrogen technologies, and demand flexibility. And third, assessing environmental, social, and economic costs and benefits of the additional clean electricity generation capacity and storage needed to implement SB 100. And finally, we should hold annual workshops to support alignment among the joint agencies and also to be consistent and so that we have continuity between the SB 100 reports. And I'll add this caveat that, we as state agencies rely a lot on workshops, but those can get stale. So I'll confess that I'm always looking for more creative ways to engage the public, aside from the workshops. And I do look to you all for ideas on ways that we can achieve that. And I'm always receptive to that. And so here I'm providing some links to material that you can access and also a way to call you to action. So again, for our state agencies, workshops are one way that we rely on for community engagement. And also the staff love receiving written comments. So that's why I included the links here to various dockets. They really appreciate having studies, thorough comments with facts and figures and things like that. They absolutely appreciate it. So do not hold back and do not hesitate if you have any information to share that way, whether it's on SB 100 in particular. And I also included here the Integrated Energy Policy Report, also known as IPER. We are doing a lot on building decarbonization, transportation electrification, and whatnot. So, I'll do fit under the umbrella of getting to 100% clean energy. And then I also included here a link to our Disadvantaged Communities Advisory Group. So this is the body I told you earlier that helps us get community input from leaders on a regular basis. They have monthly meetings. And at the last meeting, they did talk about SB 100. We had a presentation done and we got some input. So in case you're interested in hearing that recording, you can go to this link and you can also join us for those meetings. And then finally, I added a few questions here on ways that we're looking for some specific help. So we're wondering, what modeling tools exist, if you know of any, that can quantify non-energy benefits and social costs. So that was one of the challenges we had last year as we were drafting the first report. We were told by groups, including the DACAG, that we needed to include non-energy benefits. But, to be frank and forward here, we didn't know how, and our modeling tool wasn't able to do that. And then aside from modeling, how can we place a value on non-energy benefits and social costs? So is there another way aside from modeling that we can do that? And then what are effective ways to message to groups, like yours, for example, what grabs your attention? What are you receptive to? Again, this is me asking for help because I would love to find ways to get people's attention to, help us out, to engage, participate, et cetera. And then we will need to determine where to site resources, right? And these potentially could be big structures, whether it's like solar arrays or wind turbines or things like that. And so we need to know about effective approaches that either, folks like you all have applied or experienced, that we can connect with local residents, because we do want to hear, from folks about where these things can or should go, or maybe not. Right? There's also always that possibility that, places that we may think are a good fit aren't for whatever reason. And so we would love to hear from the community on that. And then finally, I am going to make a shameful plug. The Energy Commission has an annual Clean Energy Hall of Fame Awards. It started last year. And I thought it was appropriate to bring it to your attention. We are looking for nominations of leaders who are contributing to getting to an 100% clean energy future. So it could be groups like the Climate Reality Project Bay Area chapter, or any of your members or leaders who are doing good work. Our deadline is this Friday, and if you have any nominations you'd like to make, please contribute. And the link is here, but also can be found on the homepage of our Energy Commission website. So I'll end there so that we can get to the Q&A. And let me see if I can stop sharing and get back on screen here.
Thank you so much, Noemí. And yeah, applause. Thank you, clicks from everybody. We appreciate all the special slides you put together just for our audience. And we'd love to get some of those links. And same question, would it be possible to get a copy of your presentation to be posted so we could share that?
Absolutely.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you. All right, we're on perfect timing here. We've got about maybe 12 minutes to do question and answers. So we're going to ask you to please use your reactions down at the bottom, or actually raise your hands, to just click the raise hand. That way we'll see them popping up in order and I can call on you and you can unmute yourself, ask your question to the speakers. And as they say, make sure there's a question mark at the end of your comment, so that's a question. And we'll get through as many as we can before we have to wrap up at the top of the hour. So with that, let's look to Bonnie Hamilton, who leads our Solano County Policy Action Team. Hi, Bonnie, go ahead.
Hi there. And I just want to also call out that there were some questions that came up in the chat if we run out of questions. But Mark, my question is for you. I also have solar panels and backup batteries, but I'm not sure whether to use my backup batteries except for backup. And I do think you spoke a little bit about this. I don't know what's most energy efficient, if I should use my backup batteries at night and then let them fill up in the morning, or just keep them for backup, number one. Number two is I also have a heat pump, but it isn't a mini split heat pump. But I don't think my battery or my solar is kind of plugged into those because of the startup energy that it takes. So can you comment on those two things? Thank you.
Yeah, so, well, the way I run my battery is every morning, the first thing, well, the solar, as soon as it's done charging things in the home, it'll charge the battery. So it'll charge the battery every morning until it's full. And there are 3 tiers. So it's charging it like at the medium tier. And then when the sun goes down, and it stays charged all day. And then when the sun goes down, as soon as the sun goes down, it starts draining the battery. So often, like right now, the most expensive tier is like between 3 and 9 p.m. or something. So it's still, even when it gets dark, it's still at the most expensive rate. So you're much better to use your battery at that time. So the advantage of using having the battery is you charge it at a low rate and you use it at a high rate. So you save a huge amount of money over the year. So I would definitely use it continuously. It's not very cost effective just to use it for backup in emergencies, because that happens like once a year or something. With regard to the heat pumps, they run best when they're running 24 hours a day, because you don't want to like keep turning them on and turning them off. You don't need a ductless mini split. You may have ducted, but still they're ideally running continuously because they don't change. Once they're running continuously, there's a lot of energy to start them up, but once they're running, they hardly use any energy when the temperature changes gradually outside, your heat pump will change, but it's using so little energy. So I would try to set it up so that it's running continuously. And it'll be using your solar because it's just using electricity. So it's using your grid electricity, but your solar is probably going to the grid. It's first going to stuff to charge things in the home. So it is a benefit. Your solar is a benefit to your heat pumps. But yeah, I'd use your heat pumps continuously. That's how they're supposed to be used.
Good advice. Thank you so much, Mark. All right, let's go with Iman and then Jackie and Alma.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Let's go to Jackie. Jackie.
I was just wondering how the fact that we're suffering a drought and this is likely to go on And I know that a lot of the PG&E portfolio is large hydro. And so did the projections for future electrical use take into account the fact that hydro might not be dependable in the future?
Sorry, you're talking about the E3 projections or our projections?
Or for the state, because there were projections talking about what we need in the future. So in both presentations. So were we thinking that, yeah, hydro is not reliable when you guys did those projections?
Well, first of all, most of California's hydro is not from California. It comes from Canada and some from Washington State. So you really have to look at the whole. So yeah, just looking at California's hydro, California has like way more hydro than it uses. It just doesn't use its hydro that much because it has so much natural gas. Yeah, there will be years where it's lower and years where it's higher, but it imports a lot of its hydro already. So it's hard to judge how the hydro will be just based on California. You really have to look at it from a large scale. In a large scale, global warming increases precipitation globally because you have, I mean, in the equilibrium, precipitation equals evaporation. So when you have higher temperatures, you evaporate more. So you have to have more precipitation globally. So that'll shift around. The thing that global warming does is it shifts the locations of where the water is going to fall. So you may get years of droughts, but you also get years of more flooding too. So it's hard to predict what will happen, but yeah, you have to be resilient and have backup plans. But that's why interconnecting California among multiple states is already interconnected among the West. So if we make the West 100% renewable, then you kind of solve that problem because there's enough wind resource, solar resource everywhere to power not only California, but all these other states.
Thank you, Mark. Let's go back to Eamon. And Eamon, you've got a good connection?
Real quick,
Hi.
can I add something on that last?
Oh yes, go ahead, Noemí.
So I just want to add that something we learned from the pandemic is that crises will happen, and it's almost like we can expect the unexpected. So our team has been considering that, taking crises into consideration. So I think, like the drought, it's almost become a norm, but still, a crisis. So I think we're going to do more studies on that. So I don't have a specific response to the whether the team did it or not. I don't think they had, but just wanted to note that it's a good question in regards to that bigger aspect of like, unusual situations as well.
Thank you so much. Iman, are you there?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Okay, so first I just wanted to thank both speakers. I will try to ask this as quick as possible. So Mark, first I wonder where you got the bulk of your research, or where do you recommend me to start in looking at how different countries can implement a shift to total renewable energy, because you mentioned that more countries than frankly I expected can make this shift in a quicker amount of time. And then the second part to that question is, do you think that this brings up some geopolitical issues, as you mentioned, but like contrast between the global north and the global south, and how colonialism has kind of forced certain countries to make it harder for them to make that adjustment? Do you think that there's some responsibility for countries in the global north to, I guess, help these projects, move along? And if so, how?
Well, I can't really speak to responsibility. I think all countries have the capability of transitioning, and that'll save them money. There'll be a benefit for every country to transition in terms of health and climate. And I think, it's to every country's benefit to do this, regardless of their historical status, because, and if you want to, by reducing air pollution or by reducing emissions, you're going to save huge numbers of lives. And that'll result in a huge cost benefit, social cost benefit, in addition to just real direct societal cost benefit. So, and you asked the first question was about the data. So we obtained our raw data for each country from the International Energy Agency, IEA. We started with present year data, and then we derive future scenarios from those. So we have all the stuff It's in a spreadsheet, in fact, for each country. You can look at it. In one of those links I have all the papers we have. And there's spreadsheets for like our 143 countries, and you can see how it's all derived. But it's not like you can just do it in 5 minutes. It takes a lot of time. And we've been accumulating this over 12 years now. But that's where he starts with IE, International Energy Agency data and EIA data for the US.
Great, thanks, Mark. Noemí, there was sort of a north-south question in there, which actually, on a just transition, it's also somewhat topical. Do you have any further comments on that as it might relate to California?
Definitely have thoughts that are personal, but in terms of being a state agency representative, we haven't necessarily been looking at that. But one of the things that the Energy Commission does know is that California is often a leader. So, for other states and countries. And so what we do will impact what other, countries, states, et cetera, can do or even will do. So we know we're an influencer. So I'll keep it there. And I also want to note that, we also have tribes that we need to work with and, are considered nations as well. So, that even in our own state, we need to consider those nations. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you for that. Alma.
So thank you so much, both of you. So speaking of tribes, I've heard lots of concern from Native tribes, especially in the Southwest, around the use of nuclear energy, particularly from mining and milling that creates a huge amount of radioactive waste on Native land. And so I noticed it wasn't actually on Mark's list of 100% renewable. I've seen it in other conversations, and I saw that existing nuclear was on the CEC's list. And I was just curious if you could just comment on that as part of the thinking around BIPOC communities. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say first, we don't have any nuclear in our plans. In terms of existing nuclear, well, as long as if it's being subsidized, we think it should be shut down. So subsidies basically are like in New York, they're subsidizing 3 nuclear reactors at the tune of about $8 billion. And they could have used that same money to replace the reactors with not only enough renewables to replace them, but plus some. And so they're going to have to, in 12 years, they're going to have to, now it's actually 7 years, they're going to have to replace the nuclear with another $8 billion anyway. So they're spending basically $16 billion to do something that could have cost $8 billion. It's a complete boondoggle waste of money. So I absolutely oppose subsidizing nuclear reactors, and they should be shut if they are being subsidized. If they don't need subsidies, then okay, we'll keep them until they retire naturally. Like Diablo Canyon's going down in 2025, I think, because it would need $12 billion for cooling towers to replace their cooling system. So nobody wants to pay that. But yeah, so I think we don't need it. It's just it's an opportunity cost. It costs 5 times more than new wind or solar now. And new nuclear, as I mentioned, it takes years longer, more than a decade longer to implement. So it's just bad news.
Thank you. Noemí, did you have any further?
I'll just say quickly, I think for ours, we were required to include existing nuclear, but not new nuclear. And it is I guess, a popular topic. And I don't have too many other comments other than the Energy Commission was created to figure out ways to avoid having nuclear plants, up and down the coast of California. So, it's part of our history that we're there to try to avoid that. And right now with the SB 100, I don't think the plan is to use nuclear, but it was included. I believe it was mandated for us to consider the existing.
Thank you. We've got 2 minutes, so we got 2 last questions, and then we'll wrap up. So Kathy, and let's do Kathy and Gary. Kathy, are you there? Otherwise, we'll go to Gary first and come back to Kathy. Gary, go ahead.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hi.
Thanks to both of you guys for taking your time and talking to us here at our chapter. My question for Mark primarily is around national political change. With the Biden administration, a lot of us in the climate movement have become very, very optimistic with a lot of executive orders, bills pending, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, Mark, if you share optimism or cautious about how things might unfold politically and from policies that really are needed to come down the pike.
Well, I'm optimistic about his offshore wind plan. He's opened up a lot for offshore wind and pushing wind and solar and storage. So there's a lot of good things. Things I'm concerned about are, basically carbon capture, subsidizing that is basically a subsidy of the fossil fuel industry. It's just keeping them alive. And same with direct air capture. It's just basically paying the
Carbon capture, that's what he said.
pardon. Carbon capture and storage. So that's like because you're basically paying for these fossil fuel industry to stay alive because and they're pushing it too. The fossil fuel industry is pushing it too. But whereas carbon capture actually increases air pollution, it increases mining of fuels, it increases infrastructure, and it doesn't reduce an iota of air pollutants, and it increases it because you need 25% more energy to run the carbon capture equipment. And then anyway, so I'm not happy about that. He's also pushing small modular reactors, which I'm concerned about that because they're not even going to be available, if they are ever available, till 2028 to 2030, and they'll cost 4 to 5 times more at least, and they have the same problems, a lot of the same problems as your current reactors. I mean, the reason that we have big reactors is because small reactors were inefficient. Now they're going back to inefficient small reactors and claiming that those are going to solve our problems. I mean, we have existing technologies that we can implement on a large scale quickly, and we need to do that as fast as possible. We just don't have time to mess around.
Thank you. All right, Kathy, you've got the last question, and then we'll take it back to Alma. Kathy, if you could unmute yourself. Kathy Carriage.
I saw that. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, there's a question
Hi.
in the chat somewhere.
Okay, yeah, I've got a couple questions. One is in the chat,
Okay.
very prosaic. I
Do
just got
one question since we're over time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just got a heat pump. If I only need to use it every 5 or 6 days, should I still run it all the time?
I mean, if your home is well sealed, yes. So, well, when you say you need to use it, like like I have my heat pump on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and it hardly uses any energy, and the home is perfect temperature all year. But the home is really well sealed, so that helps. If you also have a well weatherized home, you've sealed your windows and your doors, and you have insulation everywhere. Yeah, the best way to run a heat pump is continuously, and it'll hardly use any energy. Because if you don't need the heat pump, let's say the temperature is 70 degrees outside, and you set your temperature to 70 degrees, the heat pump will automatically not do anything. So it'll automatically shut off by itself. It's only going on when the temperature goes out of a range. So you can set a really 65 to 75 degree range, and when it's in that range, it won't be running. It'll only run if it goes out of that range. So it's doing the same thing that you're doing, I think, except it's automatically detecting when you need to use it. So again, yeah, I would put it on continuously. That's how before, when I first got a heat pump 16 years ago, I kind of ran it like that, and it was really inefficient, and it just wasted a lot of energy because just turning it on when it was cold or when it was hot, it just started sputtering. And it was, yeah, that was not the best way to use it at all.
So what temperature do you set it at?
Well, I have a range between, I think, 68 and 77. So you just put a range what you're comfortable at.
All right, we're gonna have a whole nother talk with, this time you, Mark, taking us around your house about your heat pump. You can see we'll use up all your time on heat pump questions. So, but we're out of time. We thank the audience for sticking with us here. Alma, you want to conclude us for the evening?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So thank you again to Mark and Noemí for your time and for your expertise. I learned a ton. There are many people on this call who are familiar faces. Thank you everyone for all your involvement in the chapter. For people looking for ways to be involved in the chapter, this is right along the theme of what we are focusing on, which is 100% committed to 100% clean energy and a just transition to end the climate crisis. We have teams of people that do things related to both of these topics. We have a policy action team that is broken down by county. So each county squad works on various local county policy action. Heate is very involved in that. We have an Our Climate Moment campaign that's related to federal legislation at this very particular opportune point in time regarding federal politics. And there's an important vote tomorrow, for instance, on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act in the Senate, if you haven't called and written your senator yet. We have a youth and young adult climate action team that's working on green schools. We have business engagement working on bringing 100% clean energy to businesses. We have a climate justice team, which I head up. The climate justice team has been talking about local Bay Area climate justice efforts relating to ocean rise and BIPOC communities along oceanfront radioactive and toxic waste. We've also been talking about Indigenous voices and offering workshops on DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And then we also have membership engagement, a presentations team. We have a strong communications team that works on our newsletter, our blog, and our social media, and a really important events team. All of this is a way that you can be involved to the work that we're doing to end the global climate crisis. So thank you so much for coming. Any final words from Heate before we close?
No, have a good evening, everybody. And thanks again to Mark, Noemí. It's a treat and for you to be with us. Thank you so much for your time and everybody here. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right, thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you.